All right, so here we are. Yeah, thanks for coming. Today's little talk, we're going to be looking at the effects of dopamine, how it can affect our decision making. I'm sure we have all had moments where we may have repeated a behavior that we weren't particularly keen on, even if it was just reaching for an extra biscuit, watching another episode on our favorite TV show, um, reaching for the phone again, 5 more minutes doing this or that, whatever it is, there seems to be something in the system of the brain that overpowers our will sometimes. So I'll just have one piece of chocolate, turns into 4 or 5 pieces of chocolate, and this is relatable. Um, it might be chocolate, it might be cigarettes, it might be something like yeah, it might even be something like pornography, with the easy access to that these days, it can be a bit addictive. So this whole thing is based on how dopamine works. And dopamine is a neurotransmitter, which means it fires between two nerves in the brain, and it passes a message over to the other one to make us feel good. That's it, that's its purpose. So it gives us a feel good feeling, usually in pursuit of a reward. And that is essentially its origin, and it's the reason it's so prevalent in our bodies, and it's part of our success as a species because it drives us, it motivates us to obtain stuff. So it gets us, it's actually related to movement itself. It is released in anticipation of a reward to motivate us to achieve that reward, whatever that reward might be. Then, based on the experience of that reward, if it's better than we expected, we'll get more dopamine. If it's worse than we expected, we'll get a reduction in it. If it's what we expected, we'll probably still get a bit of a reduction as well. So the important thing to know with this is that dopamine works on a measure for measure scale. So if dopamine is pleasure, there is an equal and opposite reaction in the brain for pain. And the reason is there's this fancy word called homeostasis in the body. And homeostasis refers to all the systems of the body working at a balanced level, whether it's temperature, blood sugar, or in this case, dopamine. So if we press the button on the pleasure side, for example, having a piece of chocolate, we might experience pleasure walking towards the cupboard to get the chocolate, and then experience pleasure when we eat the chocolate. So this lifts the pleasure side up. Now, because the body doesn't want this imbalance, it will start to shut down the receptors of dopamine in the brain cells until we don't just reach back to where we were, but we experience an equal measure of pain. Okay, pain is a very general term to describe maybe discomfort, maybe a feeling of not quite rightness, or just wanting another piece, another piece of chocolate. Now, if we sit with the feelings of not of wanting another piece of chocolate, then that system will eventually reset and come back to homeostasis, and we will feel normal ourselves again. If we reach for another bit of chocolate, where again we're pressing on the pleasure side and we're exposing ourselves to more dopamine, except the second time it doesn't quite come up as high unless we have, say, a bit more. Okay, so that means again the pain has to come up more. Now, if we repeatedly do this over and over again, what happens is the baseline, because it becomes harder and harder to stimulate the rise in dopamine, and the fall becomes lower and lower, our baseline will shift down. So we will spend more time feeling unsatisfactorily. We'll spend more time feeling maybe a little bit anxious or craving or wanting something or feeling uncomfortable. And that is the forming of addiction, essentially. Gambling's a good one to highlight this, because the addiction to gambling isn't often about the winning, but it's about the moments before. It's in the uncertainty, which most of the dopamine is released. For example, in poker, when the cards are laid on the table and you don't even know what the cards are, but that's when most of the pleasure chemicals or the excitement is happening. So we live in a world which is really good at stimulating these systems, and it does it in a way which requires very little effort. So this is the key. When our dopamine is accessed without effort, so quick dopamine, that's when we get the pleasure drop off afterwards. Whereas if we experience a challenge, then the dopamine is actually the reward. So it brings us from, say, the challenge of pursuing a piece of food through the forest, going, even just having to travel to pick it or to hunt an animal. There'll be some element of challenge within that, some element of effort, and then the dopamine is the reward at the end. In nature, that is in balance. We work hard, we achieve a reward, it feels good. Even still, it doesn't last, because we then need to feed again. So that's the way the system works. However, in our society, a lot of the dopamine we're wired to receive comes very quickly and without much effort at all. So this is where things like exercise is really helpful. Cold dips are really popular at the moment, sauna and cold dips, because we're experiencing discomfort on some level, and then we experience something positive afterwards. So compare going to the gym, where it can be quite effortful, quite difficult, and then there's usually a feel-good factor afterwards, maybe going for a run, and then the runner's high afterwards. But with, for example, going out and having a few pints, you go out, you have all the happiness in the beginning, and then I'm sure we're all familiar with having too many and feeling that terrible feeling the day after. So it's a good way of demonstrating it. So there's loads more on this stuff. There is loads more. I was inspired by this particular talk by a podcast I saw with Steve Bartlett, The Diary of a CEO, and his conversation with Anna Lemke. And that is a 2-hour feast on this whole topic, and they go into it in really good level of detail, make it really easy to understand. So this is just a brief snippet of that, really. Why it's of a key interest to me is because mindfulness is one of the tools that can help us to break free from the repetitive nature of the habit forming stuff, though, to intervene with some of these unhelpful habits. So, for example, if we go for the piece of chocolate, we have a piece, we enjoy it, and then we have a bit of a low where we would usually go to grab another piece. We might consider mindfulness as an opportunity to sit with a difficulty, to sit with a discomfort. And we'll do it in a particular way. We'll sit with the discomfort with curiosity. What is it like to feel this? What is it made of? Where does it appear in our body? What is the sensation? What are the thoughts around it? So we're curious and we're observing. And non-judgmentally. So a big part of the mindfulness practice is non-judgment, which means in this case, we're not adding to the story. We're not adding, oh, I'm this kind of person or that kind of person because I'm struggling. which is easy to do because it's actually, it coexists with the feeling of lowness, the shutting down of dopamine, the lack of it. The common symptoms of that are anxiety, feeling low, depression. So, of course, our thoughts are going to change. If we're feeling depressed, our thoughts are going to follow the feelings, and we're going to notice the certain narratives in the mind. So this is where it's important not to judge, because it's a normal response. It's a natural response to pleasure, is to experience some difficulties afterwards, in some cases. So I would like to start the practice, the meditation, but opening it up for any questions before we start. So the meditation today, we'll start with a technique. This is encouraged by one of my favourite teachers, Thich Nhat Hanh. You've probably heard of me talk about him before. He's a Zen Buddhist monk, and his instruction for dealing with difficult emotions is to breathe awareness of the breath and noticing the rising and the falling of the belly. It's as simple as that. So we'll begin our practice as a way of settling into the practice with the mindfulness of the breath and awareness of sensations of the belly rising and falling with the breath. And then we'll go into more of a observing, curious, open meditation as we usually do. So if you'd like to find a posture, a position that feels comfortable for you, we'll use the sound of the bell to come together. So we're all spread out over the county, maybe further afield, but we're all connected through this experience that we're sharing now. Making any adjustments to the body or your posture that allow you to feel stable, steady, so the body can then relax. And bringing an openness to the mind, an awareness, an alertness. And as we begin, we're invited to notice the breath. Noticing the inhale and noticing the exhale. So doing our best to keep our attention with the breath. Noticing when the mind wanders into thinking, into stories, and gently returning it to the breath. Noticing the beginning, the middle, and the end of the inhale. And noticing the beginning, the middle, and the end of the exhale. We're paying particular attention to the felt sense of the breath, the sensations of the breath. As the air moves in and out of the body. Noticing how it feels around the area of the nose. Noticing how it feels around the chest. And bringing awareness to the belly. Noticing any movement of the belly. It may be obvious or it may be more subtle. It may even be difficult to detect. And that's okay. The absence of sensation is an experience which is as valid as any particular sensation. You may wish to place a hand on the belly to bring more awareness to that area. And again, noticing any sensations in and around the belly. Is it possible to detect the rising and falling of the abdomen with the breath? And this is moment by moment awareness. Of course, our experience will change. Our attention pulled into thinking, pulled into the future and the past, pulled into strong emotions, and the true measure of mindfulness is, are we able to let go of the previous experience, whatever it consists of, and arrive back in this moment, without judgment, without fuss, starting over. So each time our awareness shifts into thinking, each time we notice that that's happened, we're encouraged to let go of that thought, and navigate our awareness back to the breathing belly. And staying here. It's sometimes tempting to put a lot of effort into staying present. But it's often more helpful to relax. The least effort is often the best way. Moving to effortless awareness. Can allow our attention to widen, to include the whole body, and to include the space. So we are aware of the breath, the breathing body, the breathing body in this space. And observing each moment with fresh eyes, aware if we are trying to force our experience to be different. Is it possible just to recognize what's happening? Noticing this moment as a space, a space in which our experience is arising. Bodily sensations, emotions, thoughts, and if we wander off into thinking, coming back to the breath, connecting with the sensations of the breath. The breathing body, and the breathing body in this space. Observing the sensations emotions, and thoughts. Can we notice when the attention changes from the body, either sensations or emotions, into thoughts? Staying present, observing the mind, allowing it to be what it is in this moment. And aware of when our attention gets carried away. Is it possible to be aware of the current feeling tone or general attitude that we're inhabiting in this moment? Is there any resistance to our experience? Any judgment? Can we allow ourselves just to be with whatever experience we're having? Being and being. And in the spirit of compassion, perhaps bringing a smile to the face, either physically or emotionally, smiling at ourselves, at this human having this experience right now. Knowing that we're all doing the best we can. And that's always good enough. That we are good enough. And one of the benefits of connecting with good enough within ourselves is that everyone else becomes good enough as well. And as we come to the end of the practice, simply letting go of any effort, any striving, and coming back together again, sharing the sound of the bell, so in your own time, start to animate the body, maybe giving the fingers and toes a little wiggle, having a little stretch.